The first video discussed how Berlusconi rose from being the son of a bank clerk to the media mogul that took government in 1994. This video will discuss his fall from 2001 to the present day. Before we begin, a few words on the political beliefs of Berlusconi. For someone that has won 3 elections and has been as ruthless and unscrupulous a politician as any, we would expect some kind of consistent ideological platform. Thing is, we don't really find this with Berlusconi. Beyond what benefits Berlusconi is good, what hinders Berlusconi is bad. His second term in government saw an increased cozying up to American and UK foreign policy interests in some respects, and that, coupled with his supposed espousal of negative freedom and liberal free market economics, leaves a stale taste of neoliberalism in the mouth. This, however, would be a bit too simplistic, or rather would assume too much ideological rigidity. Berlusconi was keen to intervene in the markets where his assets were concerned, and was keen to align closer with Russia, again for monetary reasons but also perhaps personal. He formed a very close friendship with Vladimir Putin. The 2001 Forza Italia campaign was deeply personalized. Italians don't directly vote for their Prime Minister. Instead, they vote for parties who occupy the Senate and Chamber of Deputies. The Prime Minister is then chosen by the President, normally based on the leader of the largest parliamentary grouping. Many Italians aren't aware of this though, and that's thanks to the way Berlusconi thoroughly presidentialized electioneering. His saccharine grin found itself plastered all over the country, and a 125-page booklet entitled An Italian Story was sent to 15 million Italian households. The booklet portrayed Berlusconi in an almost fairy tale-like way, charting his life achievements, his personal virtues, and his aspirational vision for the Italian nation. Of course, he also had his media empire too, and with that, he, along with the National Alliance and the Lega Nord, returned to government for the second time. As we have seen, the 1994 government found itself very unstable. Things were different this time around. The Lega's vote had collapsed to around 4%. They were clinging on for political relevance and found it in entering government. With such a low share of the vote, they needed Berlusconi, and Berlusconi rewarded their cooperation with prominent positions in government. The National Alliance had also lost votes, and both were able to put differences aside. The government lasted a full term, almost unheard of in Italian politics. Berlusconi's first term was, in a word, bizarre. The cabinet ended up looking like a lawyer's office as Berlusconi's big-wig legal advisors set about transforming the country's legal system to A. aid Berlusconi's burgeoning empire, and B. keep him out of prison. One of his first moves was to provide amnesty to tax evaders, a law written up by one of his legal advisors, now the economics minister. The move alone saved Mediaset a hefty $120 million. In 2004, Berlusconi was set to sacrifice his Rete 4 terrestrial channel to satellite television, thanks to a deadline set by the Prodi government in 1998. This was to try and curb the mogul's media monopoly. He wasn't having any of it, though. The now infamous Gaspari law, similar to the 1992 Telecommunications Act, simply maintained the status quo. The law stated that with the increasing proliferation of digital television, it was unnecessary for Berlusconi to give up his terrestrial slot. He sweetened the deal by promising that 50% of all households would have digital TV by 2004, but of course, this never materialized. To wit, Berlusconi got to keep his Rete 4, and his monopoly remained unchallenged. Legally, Berlusconi did all he could to curb the magistrate's efforts to secure an ever-elusive conviction. In 2002, a law was passed that minimized charges against false accounting. This meant Berlusconi got off scot-free on charges related to millions of dollars worth of bribes being sent to old-time political associate Bettino Craxi. Gaetano Pecorella, a Berlusconi lawyer come president of the Justice Commission, passed a law that meant that only the original copies of legal documents from foreign nations could be given as evidence in court, hugely slowing legal proceedings. In Brussels, Italy vetoed a piece of legislation that would have enabled European arrest warrants for financial crimes. Most prominent was the Cirami law, another dubious piece of legislation that enabled defendants to demand a trial elsewhere if they suspected the court was biased against them. This was likely done to not only slow down the justice system further, but also to find judges that were more open to the idea of receiving dirty money. Berlusconi's lawyer Previti was caught red-handedly bribing a judge in 1991, who ruled in Berlusconi's favour. Who's to say that this couldn't happen again? Where Berlusconi really took to government personally was in international relations. Was he any good? Well, he seemed to think so and appointed himself head of the Foreign Office. He was also to be the president of the Council of Europe, hugely increasing his visibility around the world. One famous clip of this time is his altercation with the then head of the German SDP, Martin Schulz. In a notoriously funny or horrifying moment of political history, Schulz confronted Berlusconi openly about his blatant rewriting of the Italian penal code and his refusal to allow for European arrest warrants. Berlusconi wryly replied that Schulz should be given the role of camp guard in an upcoming film on the Holocaust. The shock was palpable. This isn't to say that Berlusconi alienated himself from the political elite, though. He single-handedly ended the Cold War, or so he said. The NATO summit of the 28th of May 2002 saw Berlusconi, according to the Italian press, change the course of the history of the world by bringing the American and Russian nations together. Of course, this was hardly covered outside of Italy, but it happened, Berlusconi assured everyone. Berlusconi did bring Italy closer to Bush and Blair, though, inviting the latter to a lavish stay at one of his villas, a memento of which is an odd photo of Silvio with Blair and his wife sporting a white bandana, to obscure the after effects of a recent hair transplant. He attempted to bring Italy into the Iraq war effort, but was met with astounding opposition from the public. In the end, Italian involvement was subdued, but notable and with consequence. The Carabinieri HQ in the Iraqi city of Nasiriyah was destroyed. 19 Italians were killed, the populace reamed, and this was largely responsible for Berlusconi losing the elections in 2006. The centre-left government that won was exceptionally flimsy. Consisting of 9 parties and only having achieved a slim majority, government was risky business. And of course, Berlusconi was present to rock the boat. Well, he didn't just rock the boat, he capsized it. He bribed Sergio De Gregorio of a party ironically named Italy of Values to switch sides. Gregorio has admitted to and been charged with taking €3 million. The country went back to the polls, and by 2008 Berlusconi was back in the business of running the country, terrifically with a larger democratic mandate than before. In terms of domestic politics, we can say that Berlusconi didn't really do all that much. He laxed tools on taxation. Tax evasion, after all, is a national pastime in Italy, and continued to do all he could to evade the magistrates. However, Berlusconi wasn't notable for what he did in government, so much as the cavalcade of sleaze that occurred outside of it. This raises the question: to what extent should we pay too much mind to the goings-on of politicians outside of their political duties? Perhaps not much. Everyone has their kinks, and perhaps the trigger-happy press in Italy went way overboard in publishing tawdry images of Berlusconi's now infamous get-togethers. However, the crassness with which Berlusconi carried himself throughout this period is difficult to overstate. In one tapped conversation involving Berlusconi and Barre as a businessman come pimp for the Prime Minister, Berlusconi confessed to only being the Prime Minister in his spare time. Instead, he quipped, his focus was on passing the day with his babes. And indeed he did, with reckless abandon. Escort Patrizia Daddario published Take Your Pleasure, Prime Minister in 2009, detailing her sexual escapades with Berlusconi, noting his stamina and also his predilection for numerous girls at once. Even she, a seasoned veteran of the sex trade, was shocked at how insatiable his appetite was. More perplexing was Berlusconi's relationship with the young Noemi Letizia. He attended her 18th birthday party in 2009 and was affectionately called Papi by the cute, aspiring underwear model. This resulted in his soon-to-be divorcee, Veronica Lario, publicly raging, I will no longer stay with a man who hangs around with minors. A barb, if there ever was one. Berlusconi attempted to brush off the whole thing. Her father, he would explain, was a driver of craxies, and so the family were old friends of his. This wasn't true though. Turned out at the age of 17, Noemi had spent a week or so at Silvio's Villa Certosa in Sardinia. Did they have sex? Well, of course, Berlusconi vociferously denies this, as does Noemi, but the whole thing does sit incredibly uneasily. Thing is, this isn't Berlusconi's only dalliance with the young and underage. Few around Europe are unaware of Berlusconi's ill-famed bunga bunga parties, and the most notorious of attendees, Karima El Mahroug, better known by her stage name, Ruby the Heart Stealer. She was a prostitute and brought to the Prime Minister's attention when she was only 16 by Emilio Fede, an anchorman on Berlusconi's Rete Quattro and also, it seems, excellent at the procurement of women. It was he who also introduced him to Noemi Letizia. The Heart Stealer lived up to her name. Silvio seemed quite smitten with his new catch, so smitten in fact that when she was arrested for stealing and detained at Milan's police station, Berlusconi arranged for her to be released on the grounds that she was the granddaughter of the Egyptian president. Of course, this definitely, 100% certainly was not true, and this attracted the attention of those in high places. Come 2011, Berlusconi had 2 new charges at his door. That of abusing his powers in office and sleeping with an underage prostitute. He was found guilty in 2013, but in 2015, Berlusconi successfully appealed the ruling. There wasn't enough evidence to suggest he knew the girl's age. To be fair though, that's all by the by. What's truly astonishing in all this is the dark absurdity of the goings-on at these bunga bunga parties. Former participants came forward and told stories in lurid detail, some of which involved the erection of a giant phallus that women danced around naked whilst singing the prolific and sycophantic "Thank Goodness for Berlusconi" theme song. Girls would aggressively compete with each other to win the Prime Minister's fancy. The one he took to bed at the end of the night could be in for thousands of euros in compensation. Yeah, let's move on. Economically, the country was in a shambles as the financial crisis ravaged Europe. The danger was that Italy was going to go the way of Greece, only everyone knew that the 4th largest economy in Europe was simply too big to bail out. The European Central Bank had to intervene on September the 29th of 2011. They demanded labour reforms under the threat of no longer supporting government bonds. Then in November, the IMF intervened, policing the changes made to the Italian economy. Later that month, Berlusconi resigned. As it so happens, the whole thing was actually somewhat of a coup. The President of the Republic, Giorgio Napolitano, was in cahoots with Angela Merkel, who plotted behind the scenes to arrange for Silvio's departure. Napolitano had already positioned Mario Monti to step into Berlusconi's shoes, and after his departure, a technocratic government was instituted which lasted 18 months. This broke a long tradition of the president being a ceremonial role in Italian politics. Still, Napolitano was favourably regarded and became the longest-serving president in the country's history. As for Monti, things started well, and he enjoyed high approval ratings. At first, that is. Of course, the austerity measures had to come, and come they did. This, coupled with the proverbial rat-a-tat-tat of the taxman, made many an Italian squeamish. By the 2013 elections, things were back to normal, with Berlusconi once again set on becoming Prime Minister. His campaign strategy had changed somewhat though. Previously, he was rambunctiously defaming the magistrates, and the left-wing coalition known as the Union, that Berlusconi dubbed the Soviet Union. Never short on the hyperbole. Things were different now though. According to Berlusconi, and frankly he wasn't entirely wrong, the EU had stripped Italy of its sovereignty through economic diktats and, even worse, had overruled democratic elections as foreign politicians had pressured Napolitano to seek a replacement and form an interim government. To be honest, this is not an untruthful position, the morality of which largely hinges on your political persuasion. Thus, Berlusconi threatened leaving the euro. He even promised to return all the tax increases to the populace mandated by the Monti government under the auspices of the EU Diktat, a classic campaign of giving the power back to the people. He had some issues though. Firstly, the Catholic Church was horrified with his comportment and had well and truly rinsed their hands of him. Secondly, a new party had come onto the scene in the form of the Five Star Movement, who skyrocketed to becoming the biggest party in Parliament on a platform of anti-corruption. Indeed, in a way it seems Berlusconi had come full circle. He came to power in 1994 on the back of political scandal, promising anti-corruption reforms and clean governance. Now, almost 20 years later, a new party was on the scene, promising anti-corruption reforms, only now Berlusconi was the principal culprit. This video is entitled The Fall of Berlusconi. Indeed, on the back of the 2018 elections, it seems certain that he will never be Prime Minister again. In 2013, he received his one and only definitive conviction regarding Fininvest's overseas slush funds. Being over 70 years of age, he was exempt from prison, thanks to another one of his bespoke laws, I should add, and thus did community service helping the elderly and mentally impaired. As a result, he was barred from politics until 2019. Of course, this didn't stop him trying with the proxy of Antonio Tajani to fill the role of PM were Forza Italia to finish first in the 2018 elections. Needless to say, they didn't, and now Matteo Salvini of the Lega is the frontman for the Italian centre-right. More thanks to Berlusconi's discredited platform, it should be emphasised. But still, back to the name of the video. The fall suggests a collapse, that someone reached the heights and then plummeted to oblivion. On reflection though, this cannot really be said of Silvio. In the first video I referenced a Marcello Dell'Utri quote, which asserted that Berlusconi was television. No doubt many Italians would wince at the suggestion, but to me it seems Berlusconi is Italy, on a more fundamental level than can be undone by simply removing his political prospects. Few have done so much as Berlusconi to sediment a national culture, be it in football, television, politics, international recognition. Approaching his mid-80s, his time left is numbered, irrespective of facelifts, hair transplants, youthful quips and infantile faux pas. Needless to say though, his spry effervescence, his imprint on Italian life, will be felt for decades to come, both the positive and the negative. Thanks a lot for watching this video. If you liked the video, don't forget to click like and please do subscribe if you haven't already. If you didn't, click dislike, leave a comment, tell me where I went wrong. As always, a huge thank you to all of my patrons. It's thanks to you guys that these videos are regular. If it's within your means to do so and you like what I do, please consider becoming a patron yourself. Thanks a lot and until next time.